I think this is going to be a wonderful evening that we are going to share with Allan on attention and awareness, inseparable twins at the heart of mindful practice, how to improve your being while you do your doing. So Allan, I will let you be as you do.
Thank you very much, Phil, and thank you to all of you who are taking the time out this evening. I do have some slides. We're also going to be practicing some awareness and attention in a very experiential way. I do want to open with some context, though. There's something for all of you who are attending that relates to mindfulness. There's something that you became aware of at some point in your life, and there's something about mindfulness itself, and each person's story and journey is different. But right there is the heart of the practice of mindfulness. The fact that something caught your attention, you became aware of it, this thing called mindfulness, and there's something that's caught you there. And so awareness and attention is not something we don't already do. In fact, it's something we're doing all the time. But a lot of the time it is just automatic. And so if we come down to this basic level of awareness and attention, these inseparable twins, that we're paying attention and we're aware at the same time. And as I was looking for twins on the Wikimedia site for free images, this photograph, whose source I've referenced, came to me. And as someone who was a pediatrician in a former life, to see twins like this is very, very tender. There's a tenderness that relates to how we approach ourselves and the world and what mindfulness can do. And mindfulness is both process and content. It's a being and a doing, as Phil mentioned. Those twins need equal amounts of attention. You don't ignore one because you're paying attention to the other. And they go together, and they grow together, and they feed each other, and they are related. And so this idea of awareness and attention is a conversation that goes and has gone on for thousands of years, where people are talking about what does it mean to pay attention? What is awareness? And there are philosophical explorations of this, there are religious and spiritual explorations, etc. But all of this, as Phil said, is very interesting if you want to read it, but it's more about being present. And there's something about being present with what? Well, the first step is awareness and attention, that we have this choice of what we attend to. And I'm going to say something about language, because it's also really, really important. There's a part of our brain that wants everything to be literal, defined, absolute, to manipulate it, to simplify it, to reduce it into one thing. But the problem with words is that words are just the beginning. And in the words of T.S. Eliot, a poet, he said, words after speech reach into the silence. Words after speech reach into the silence. And right now, as you are aware and listening to that little phrase, you may notice there's something coming up for you. What does that say to you? Now, I don't know what T.S. Eliot meant when he said words reach into the silence, because I don't know where those words came from in him, but I know that they reached into me and I'm sharing them with you, and they may reach inside you. And so we open ourselves with awareness and attention to this inner world and this inner space. The word attention, I don't look up definitions, I look up the roots of words. And this slide, a few things struck me about the root of the word attention. We talk about paying attention. There's a price. And the price to pay is actually the prize. Because when we pay attention, we notice things. And when we notice things, we're in a more intimate relationship with them, and we can work with them. So we pay attention. It's important. The word attending and the word tender. So doctors are called attendings because we're attending to something important. We're attending to the twins. And the other thing about attention is it also speaks to a reaching and a stretching towards. And so this idea of reaching into something, that there's something there for us to attend to because it has something to tell us or teach us or inform our relationship with it. So that's the first word, attention. The second word is awareness, which is also an interesting one, and it has the same root as the word weary. Now, not weary in the sense of I'm tired, but wary in the sense of I need to be wary of this. I need to be vigilant. I need to be watching, because what we attend to informs our choices, and our choices inform our actions, and our actions become our habits, our character, our destiny, etc. So we need this certain watching vigilance. It's not fear, it's not over-analysis, it's just being able to open this with awareness and attention. So, as mentioned, what we're going to do is we're going to drop in and we're going to experience some practice, and I'm going to lead this mindful practice around the dropping in beyond the words. And when I do this, I talk about dropping into my interior space, and I close my eyes on purpose. You don't have to, because it helps me tune out this wonderful, deliciously visual world out there. And of course, as we all know, the mind is very active, and the mind will just go off if we let it, because it's what it does. Not a problem, don't need to judge it. And so we need to anchor our attention in this moment. And there are a couple of anchors, and we're not going to do a body scan, as some of you may have heard of, but we can anchor ourselves in the body. But I invite you just to shift your attention as if it's a spotlight. You are the lighting director in the stage of your life, and you decide where the spotlight goes. And for now, shift your attention to the breath. And however your breath is, just allowing the breath to lead you. Now, in this field of awareness that you're attending to, called the breath, your mind will want to intrude. Your mind will want to comment. Your mind will want to try and control the breath. But the breath is wonderful because all you've got to do is get out of the way, and the breath knows exactly what to do. So bringing your awareness to the breath wherever you notice it most prominently. Perhaps that's the gentle rise and fall of your belly. Perhaps it's the rise and fall of your chest. Perhaps it's the subtle movement of cooler room air in at your nostrils and warmer air out. And what's important here is not where you're paying attention to the breath. It's just that you're paying attention. Once you pay attention, you become aware. And awareness is about watching and being vigilant. And watching how your mind will want to take you off. And when it does, say, thank you, mind, for all the thinking and planning you do. But right now, I'm shifting the attention back to the breath. And following the cycles of the breath with a slightly narrower lens, you're tuning in to, there's a little gap at the end of the out-breath. That's the first stage or first phase. There's an in-breath, you can follow it all the way in. There's another little gap, and then the out-breath. And in fact, there's no need for you to do anything with the breath, because the breath is a trusted friend. It knows how to regulate itself. It knows how to speed up and get deeper when you exercise. It knows how to keep on doing what it does when you fall asleep, and knows what to do when you wake up in the morning. So we use the breath as an anchor just so that we don't get distracted by the stories in the mind. But being aware that there are other things going on. They sort of might be in the background. And so the spotlight on the breath is not to try and exclude everything else, but just to be highlighting it. So most of your attention is on the breath, but you also may be aware of other things, thoughts, emotions, a sound outside, an ache in your leg, a hum in the room. And so we're interested with awareness and attention about the phenomenon of paying attention. And you can understand how these twins run together perhaps in your experience right now. And they're almost inseparable. So you're paying attention to the breath, and at the same time you can be aware that your mind is generating some story, or that you've also got an awareness of a thought or an emotion. And both are happening simultaneously almost. And this is something else about awareness and attention. That attention can be very single-pointed, like when you're balancing your checkbook or paying your taxes, and you better have the period in the right place and not add extra zeros in your tax return. You need to pay very careful attention in a micro level. But then also you can be aware of wide openness, awareness. And there's something here about intention and permission. Just to, as best you can, settle into this experience of just awareness and attention. Because right now you're paying attention and you're aware. When you're aware, your mind goes off and you're not on the breath anymore, come back. So we're paying particular attention to the experience of knowing, an awareness, a perception. I can know that I'm paying attention. I can know when I'm not paying attention. And perhaps you're getting some sense, even if it's fleeting, that you can't really be paying attention to something without being aware of it. And when I am aware of something, that something is what I'm attending to. It's almost impossible to tease those out separately. And this capacity to know that we know is part of what makes us human. and part of our higher faculties. In fact, our species is called Homo sapiens sapiens. And the word sapiens come from the word Sophia, S-A-P-S-O-P, which is the root of the word philosophy, which is related to knowledge and knowing. So we're sapiens sapiens. So we are the species that knows, and there's another layer. We know that we know. We can take this observing status to our own experience. So we can know we're off course. We can know that something needs to change perhaps in our lives, or the way we are being in the world, or what we are doing. And so this is the foundation. And a tremendous amount is written and spoken about with mindfulness in terms of attention and awareness, and what are they? And of course there is no one fixed definition anyway. So just perhaps as you're here, and I'm going to be silent for a couple of minutes, just to observe whether you're in the paying attention mode or whether you're in the knowing mode. How are you experiencing yourself? And there's no need to judge yourself if things are just going off somewhere. The moment you notice that's off, well, that's an awareness because you're paying attention. So in fact, you can't get this wrong. And the invitation at all of our meetings is not so much to tell you what you should be experiencing, but more about just becoming aware of what's going on for you. And what's it like when I pay attention? And perhaps something's coming up for you now, and I don't know what that is, or maybe nothing. Maybe there's a little curiosity. Maybe you've noticed something about awareness and attention. Maybe you're confused. Maybe nothing's happening. Maybe you're having an aha moment. All of that is valid. Because both awareness and attention are big enough to hold and to contain. And they're vast enough to be the field in which all your experiences are happening, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So wherever you are, just taking another 3 slightly deeper breaths, as best as you can, following the breath through the 3 cycles. And if your eyes have been closed, becoming aware and paying attention, exactly when do your eyes open? And did you actually decide when your eyes opened, or did they kind of do it on their own? Because there is a body wisdom that's going on way beyond our thinking mind. So some of you may be in the mood to jot down a couple of things that came up during the sit. And if you want to just write down literally 1 or 2 words in the chat room, we'll pick them up later and just see what comes up for you, because those are going to be your learnings. Whatever came up for you is something that's caught your attention. It's something that's come into your awareness. This is an acronym. A number of you may know it. It's RAIN. It's one of the acronyms for mindfulness. This is one of your take-home messages for tonight. We recognize a particular moment because this is where we're at. And to accept and allow whatever is to be there. I spoke about intention. There's permission to be with whatever is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Because when we work with it, we can investigate it. That's what I had you do this evening. Just notice what's coming up. Investigate it. Look at it. Be curious. Examine it. What did you like? What didn't you like? Maybe the sitting left you cold. Whatever. It's all grist for the mill. And then the N, is to just see what comes up. What arose as you paid more attention and as you became more aware, just what naturally came up. And we'll talk about the RAIN acronym a bit later as well. John Kabat-Zinn is the person who's most credited with bringing mindfulness practice into the broader North American Western culture. And these are the components, he doesn't call it his definition, but components of what he considers mindfulness to be. Now there's conversations and writings that go back nearly 2,000 years about what mindfulness is and isn't. And remember that these things, although they were originally written in different languages, including Pali and Sanskrit, and there's Christian meditation, and there are meditations in Latin from the Middle Ages, and there's Jewish meditation, and there's meditations all over the place. So John Kabat-Zinn tried to distill out what he believed were the core components. It's moment to moment, which is what I had you do. Where are you right now? Because this is the only moment we're alive. You've got to do this on purpose. There needs to be intention, otherwise the mind just goes off. Moment to moment on purpose and without judging it, because we can be very quick to judge our emotions. And there are lots of talks that we have recorded. They're on the website, and there'll be more coming about how do we navigate emotions, because they yank us around. So if things yank us around and we want to run away from them, we're not going to be in relation, we're not going to become as deeply aware as we can, we're not going to be paying attention to the lessons we need to learn, we're not going to make the changes we want in our lives. So that's what that non-judgmental is. And in fact, I gave a whole talk a few months back on non-judgment at WTM. So he says it's on purpose, moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness by paying attention. That's it. It's as simple as that. I have made up a couple of slides because I see mindfulness as having 2 components, a process and a content. The process is what I've just led you through, the how. So I ask you to pay attention, and when you paid attention, you possibly became more aware of things. And in that moment of awareness, if we're off course, you can make a choice. The moment I know that I am impatient, the moment I'm aware of impatience, I can either let the impatience carry me off and increase my irritability, or I can go, okay, Allan, time to practice patience. The moment I'm angry, perhaps, and about to say something I may regret, I can say, Allan, you're getting worked up. So this is not just an intellectual exercise to pay attention, become aware. This is real practical implications in our lives, because in that moment of awareness, there's choice. And our retreat is talking about that capacity. So how do we choose to respond to uncertainty and changing times? That's the relevance of this, the applicability, the practical aspects. The moment I make a choice, I can reset my intention. My intention is not to say something that I'll regret if I'm angry or upset. So I reset my intention, and the moment I reset my intention, I'm likelier to be in a wiser mind, I'm likelier to take a wiser action, and I'm likelier to get a better outcome, which I call the human curriculum, which I call my life. And so getting a better outcome, which everybody wants, starts with awareness and attention right at the top. The second slide is mindfulness of. And people talk about mindfulness of. So there's a content aspect. I can be aware of the now, this moment. This is the only moment I actually have choice about how I meet what my life is at this moment. Now, in this moment, I also can reflect on my past. I also need to look at my future, and we need to plan. But all of that planning or reworking our past or our future happens in the moment. So any way you cut it, you're back to the now. And now is a time and a place. In any one moment, the mind gives us pop-ups. And I use this as a metaphor because in the computer world, you're on a website, you get a pop-up. Now, pop-ups are not always welcome, and our strong feelings may not be welcome. Anger or whatever, or confusion or sadness or loneliness or fear or anger. But when it pops up, the thoughts and the feelings just seem to come together. There are very few thoughts which don't have an emotional tone to them, a flavor. And there are very few emotions we have where we don't have words, or we're trying to find the words to describe them. So I've got those two arrows there between thoughts and feelings. And of course, the thoughts and the feelings, as I've already mentioned, they lead to actions which are only of three kinds: unhelpful, neutral, or helpful. Now, this is not an academic slide, because in any moment I can be mindful of the context where I am, I can be mindful of my thoughts and my feelings, and I can be mindful of the actions I'm about to take. And if it's unhelpful, stop. That's why unhelpful is in red. Neutral, or helpful. And I want to do more helpful things in my life. Beyond thoughts and feelings, though, and this is where mindfulness and awareness and attention, there is an invitation to look at our lives in a much broader picture. So meditation practices and reflections have been incorporated into the deeper questions of our humanity and what it means to be human. So at the bottom three, the green one is our biology: regulation, I get aroused, I need to calm down, breath work, relaxation, visualization, etc. I'm not spending time on that, but everybody knows that. We need to regulate ourselves. The next level up is emotions. So if I am worked up and angry, I start to get angry. And the moment I do that, it also then brings in all my thinking, and my reasoning goes out the window. And these three things can happen really, really quickly, because my stories of the world, or the stories about my emotions, or my role on the planet, they can all feed each other, those thoughts, feelings, and the adrenaline that comes with it. So that's a whole topic on its own. But for the purposes of this talk, all that stuff needs our attention as well. But what also needs our attention to fill out our humanity are the next four golden instruments in the orchestra. I talk about goodness. Is it good for me to continue to get upset about things I can't control? Is it good for me? So I talk about there's a certain ethic about being in control and in relation to ourselves. There's something important here about how we have a relationship with ourselves. So that's good. If my answer is no, it's not good for me to freak out all the time about things I can't control, then that's helpful. I've become aware of that. And then I can pay attention to setting another intention to do something different, control what I can. The next one up is relationship both with self and others. Because many of us have a very critical relationship with ourselves. We're our own worst enemies. We judge ourselves, we've got our weaknesses, we're not good enough, etc., etc. Again, each of these levels is a whole conversation on its own. But I can say, am I treating myself kindly right now? Is this how I treat my best friend? So again, awareness and attention we can bring into the goodness, self and others, relationship to self. The next level up, I use the word spirit, heart, and energy interchangeably. And I leave these words undefined because words after speech reach into the silence. So what is the human spirit? We talk about all the time. You've heard the term. What is the human spirit? I don't need to define it, but I know when I'm working in the territory. What kind of energy does my heart have? What kind of energy do I want to bring to the day? What does my heart yearn for? When my heart is broken, it yearns for compassion and kindness and fixing. The heart is broken because of pain and suffering. The heart is also the place of tenderness and caring. So we need to work very carefully with our spirit and energy, and we can set intention in spite of what's going on out there to live in a certain way. The word at the top is soul. I can pay attention to soul, and I use it in the way that the psychologist Carl Jung uses it, where he talks about the authentic true self, because many of us live our lives according to what we believe other people have told us you should live your life by. So many of us are not living according to our inner being, the deepest part of ourselves, what it means for me to be human. What's my story? If you want to use the word soul in a religious sense, a monotheistic one, you can do that too. Absolutely. What is my role? What does God want from me? So the use of the word soul here is quite wide, and you can use it. So again, bringing this back, awareness and attention is not just about controlling my thoughts and my feelings and my anger and my irritation. It can take us into these other parts of our humanity, and we can play all these other instruments better, so we make richer music. You're getting a sense by now as well that there are two parts to us. There's the being and the doing. And they never really separate. We call ourselves human beings. We're not human doings. We're called human beings. And there's a certain way of being in the world. How do I want to be in the world? Yes, with all its own sufferings. And how do I want to be in relation with myself, with all my own weaknesses and foibles, etc.? And these questions never go away. In fact, they're beautiful questions because they guide us. And the answers to the questions will come when I pay attention and become aware. So every single slide I'm tying back to the awareness and attention, awareness and attention. We can think of the being as sort of the content. Do I want to be a calmer person? Do I want to be a more forgiving person? Do I want to be a more compassionate person? Do I want to be a more curious person? Do I want to be a more athletic person? Whatever. You can apply these questions to any aspect of your life. If you remember a couple of slides back, at the bottom, the better outcome is your life. Truly. This is not academic, this is not philosophical, this is not religious, this is not intellectual, this is not academic. This is really, really practical stuff. And trying to be while I'm doing my doing. I only have a few slides left. This slide I made up a few months ago, and it's two simple questions. This is a take-home message. Two simple questions. How do I want to be in the world? It's a great question. It's a question worthy of paying attention to, because a lot of awarenesses will come up. How do I want to be in the world? And then the right-hand column at the top is, what do I do to get there? So there's the what on the left-hand side, and the how is on the right-hand side. Now, about a year ago, in the middle of the COVID, as I was slipping into a funk that many people have experienced, and I went through all the phases myself, from anger, confusion, irritation, loss, grief, languishing, regret, anger, you name it, a whole lot. And it's not over yet. I came up with two acronyms, PBJ, these are the words in black at the top of the column. PBJ, peace, beauty, and joy. When I find myself at war with myself or the world, and I'm aware of it, I say, Allan, would you like to be more peaceful? The answer is yes, of course I want to be more peaceful. Even in the presence of. the external wars or the fighting or the politics or whatever. When I feel ugly inside and I'm having an ugly attitude to myself, I look for beauty, because there's beauty in everything. There's beauty in my breath, there's beauty waking up in the morning, there's beauty in nature. So when I look and see my ugliness, I look for beauty. There's the choice and intention to come back. And then when I'm feeling down and despondent and empty or depressed, I had a really rough day yesterday. I was overwhelmed a lot of the day by just how much sadness there is and loss and grief. And I just sat with it. I didn't go hunting for joy, right? I didn't try to dismiss or deny the really, really funk I was in yesterday. And I spoke to a couple of people and I knew it would pass, as it always does. But sometimes you can speed up that process and look for joy. So PBJ are guideposts. Because of all the yucky stuff, I want to look for the PBJ. How do I do that? Well, SPK is the second acronym I came up with. Slow down, Allan. And this is part of the mind where we're always jumping into the future. When will COVID end? And when will the politicians this? And when will those people do that? And when will these people do that? Oh, we're always jumping. Slow down. Because of this going on and this ruminating, it really doesn't help. All we end up doing is spinning our wheels. The moment I slow down, I'm kinder. There's the doorway. The moment I slow down, I'm aware that I can come back to this moment with awareness and attention and say to myself, what's going on? What is this? What patterns are kicking in? What emotions? Is this how I want to be? No. How do you want to be? And the moment I'm more patient, I'm kinder. So those are my acronyms. I've got them at the top. Of course, this list is a list of other ways you may want to be, and the other things you may need to practice. And all of us have a human curriculum, and I have 2 or 3 of the things on the left-hand column that I'm constantly working on. It's part of my human curriculum. And there are 2 or 3 practices on the right-hand column that I constantly have to practice. But when you put these 2 together, you notice I've put the yin-yang symbol in the middle. I'll talk about that in a bit. We put these 2 together and there's a harmonic. How do I want to be, and what do I need to do to get there? And you can't separate out that being and doing, because they inform each other. We are called human beings. I mentioned that earlier on. And we are a verb. We're actually not a noun. We are human beings. Right now we are listening, we are experiencing, we are thinking, we are feeling, we are judging, we are ruminating, we're breathing. And so everything's changing. So it starts at the bottom with our being. What am I? I'm a human being with that full orchestra, which I want to pay attention to. As I move up to my beliefs, what is significant to me? What's important? What's valuable? Those 2 things are an internal conversation with myself about how and who I am in the world. The next ones are external, as it were. Where do I belong? Who's my tribe? All of you have shown up in a mindfulness group. And there are many, many groups and many, many tribes we belong to, and that's great. Hooray that there's choice. And then, how do I want to show up in the world? That's benevolence. What do I have to give to the world? How do I manifest my true self? And when I'm lost, it's usually because I haven't paid attention to some of these things. I've forgotten who I and what I am. I've forgotten my core beliefs. I'm hanging out with the wrong crowd of people, and I'm actually doing something in the world I don't want to be doing. No wonder people get depressed and anxious, because if they're not paying attention to these first 4 B's, you get lost. So again, awareness and attention to these 4 B's. And then the last one, becoming. We're constantly changing. You've noticed your thoughts come and go, our judgments come and go, our moods come and go. And this is at the core of other teachings related to mindfulness, that we become aware that there's no fixed, permanent, unchanging me. My identity as Allan Donsky is just something utilitarian in the world. My name and my photo have to match on my passport or my driver's license if I get on a plane, whatever. But that's not who I am. Another whole conversation. So right now, again, in the last few minutes, I'm going to just invite us to just drop in again. And just maybe silently repeating to yourself, what am I aware of right now? And there's no right answers, because whatever you're aware of is your experience in this moment. And if you get completely lost, just come back to the breath perhaps for a few moments. Anchor yourself and then just come back to the word awareness. What's showing up? What's asking to be heard? Perhaps one of those instruments in the orchestra has been silent for too long and needs a little bit of tuning. The goodness ethical, relationship with self, heart-spirit energy, your true authentic self. What is asking to be heard? What are you being called to attend to inside of yourself? Just make a mental note of it or write down on a piece of paper. Follow up later. And we'll just shift our attention back to the slides. I want to talk about harmonics and harmony. And it came from the idea and the extension of the orchestra. So there's being and doing, they go together. Notice the yin-yang symbol, and I began using this a while back. And what I love about the yin-yang symbol is it represents two completely different pieces, but they're not really different. The dark and the light make up the whole. They are mirror images of each other. They have a beautiful, gentle curve relationship between the two. There's light in the dark and there's dark in the light. Neither one of them is trying to dominate the other, because you cannot get rid of it. There would not be light. We wouldn't appreciate lightness unless we experience darkness. We wouldn't appreciate joy as much as we do if we didn't experience sorrow, and vice versa. So we live constantly in what seems to be this tension of opposites. And in relation to ourselves, those arrows at the bottom, we can tend to want to run away from the yucky stuff, the unpleasant stuff, and avoid it. I don't want to deal with it. But good luck, you can't run from yourself. So in fact, what we need to do is we need to connect. Now there's a time to avoid and there's a time to connect. But more often than not, if we reconnect with ourselves in healthier ways, by paying attention and becoming aware, we can work with things more wisely. We can make those choices. We can reset intentions. There are times, of course, when we will avoid. So yesterday my energy was off. I did not accomplish some of the things I wanted to do yesterday. Now you could say that I was lazy and I should have pushed myself through it. But this is where gentility comes in as well. That can I just realize that this is a time to not be doing this? So it's not that one is good or one is bad, or avoidance is bad and connection is good, because we can also overwhelm the system. So we're constantly looking for this harmonic, where we don't want to go too far one way, we don't want to go too far the other way. And each person has a different threshold and sees themselves and the world differently. So to come to some peace within yourself, without always being at war with yourself, without always fighting your emotions, without wagging the finger at yourself so much and so hard. And the retreat's going to explore a lot of this, actually, about dealing with this constant change, because there's a term out there, languishing, there's long-term mental health issues are getting worse, anxiety, depression, there's a beautiful term called languishing, right, where nothing seems to be happening. And we're wanting things to move, but they're not, and just the tiredness of 18 months of this. And we're all tired, and acknowledging that gently. Beginnings and no ends. Because we're human beings, and because we're always becoming, there's no such thing as, there never was, by the way, a normal. People say, I want things to return to normal. There never was a normal. The word normal has got so many different meanings, and I won't go into that, but nothing was ever normal. It's just what we were used to. And now things have been thrown up, and we've shifted from order at the top in green, means go, and it's pleasant. I'd use a traffic light colors here. And then there's chaos. And chaos is red, and it represents danger and worry. And then things start to reorder themselves. And then you can go back to order. But you can also flip-flop the other way. That sometimes from chaos there can suddenly be aha moments, and some things there's clarity. So chaos doesn't always have to go through this process of this nurturing and incubation with reorder. Sometimes you think you've just got it all together again, you're reordering, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then all of a sudden chaos is back again. This is the nature of life. There are beginnings and there are no ends. And the beauty of recognizing and being present in the moment with attention and awareness is that every moment is fresh. You've never been in this exact moment before. You've never heard this exact talk before. You've never heard me put these words together again. If I had to come back next week and do the same talk with these same slides, I'd probably say completely different things. But that's okay. So this capacity to let go, this capacity to open to the moment, in fact, is the space for creativity and change and resetting intentions and newness and fulfillment and making things better. Our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with the world. And there's no better time to really ask the deep questions than in the middle of chaos. It's very exhausting. It's very exhausting. So, summary slide. We return to the now. With attention comes awareness. And the moment I'm aware, I can check what I'm paying attention to and whether I'm getting carried away or not. Return to the now. Let it rain. Accept what's coming up. Investigate it. Look at it. Be curious. Be open. And see what naturally arises. And sometimes what you may need is some gentility and compassion. Just being aware and attention is step one. To what end? To make life better for yourselves and others. To set your intention. What do I want to do? And then to find that harmonic between the two. To find the harmonic between what seems to be opposing forces, but they're not. And the yin-yang reminds us of that. So we're not trying to dominate, we're not trying to fix, we're trying to navigate. We are becoming in our doing, and we are becoming constantly in our being as well. 7:02. I'm aware that I would get through the material in time. We've got lots of time to chat. Everyone's got access to the slides. People may have taken screenshots. People may have taken notes. So I think right now back to you, Phil, please.
Allan, you never fail. Always a tremendous presentation. So much valuable information there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this is an opportunity for everyone to ask their questions. And as we said, no question is bad or wrong or unacceptable. So please enter into the chat a question that you might like to ask Allan. And for those of you who want to raise their hand, and that should be under the reactions icon, you have the opportunity to be in discussion with Allan. And so that often adds an extra highlighter. There's something new that comes up when you actually talk and present your question. So I would please invite everybody out there to enter their questions in the chat or raise their hand. And so Allan, just as we're waiting for a few questions to come in, we have a few observations and a question. They say that we're not present, that we are present 47% of the time. So, you know, I would be aware all the time if I could just remember to be aware.
Right.
So I wondered if you could offer our audience some practical cues, some practical tips, and perhaps about cues or resources that allows people to remember to be present.
Yeah. What mindfulness has helped me with in a very practical way is clarity. So I practice watching, and whenever I'm off, that's how I came up with my SPK. Whenever I'm off, that's how I came up with the PBJ. Whenever I'm feeling something yucky, I call it the yucky. I don't want to label feelings as negative or bad. Whenever I'm feeling off and I'm getting carried away with it too far, I say to myself, what's going on? I'm aware that I'm at war with myself. That's how I came up with the P for peace. I'm getting ugly and I'm feeling ugly. I can be justified in my strong feelings of anger or resentment or whatever, but I don't feel good about it. So there's something about the quality of my being that I'm not enjoying myself. I don't like to be this way, even if I justify why I've got my belief. That's how I came up with the B, the beauty. I can sink just as much as anybody else into pain and despondency and grief and suffering. But I want to look at it, but I don't want to linger there, because I have a choice about my relationship to it. That's how I came up with the joy. And I do all of that by slowing down and paying attention in a really practical way. So just notice in the course of the day, which we all have, notice when you're getting any feeling. Notice when you're too excited and a friend says, hey, calm down. Notice your excitement. What's that about? It's not always that we notice the heavy stuff. We can get too excited. We can get overconfident. We can get arrogant. We can get jumping ahead too far into the future. So our excitement can also be like, whoa, it's too much. So just as the yucky stuff can be too much, the yummy stuff can be too much as well. That's where equanimity and harmony come in. So just notice what comes up in the course of your day. Notice, take a little inventory tomorrow notice not so much your moods, but your sort of energy. At what points in the day were you sort of, yeah, I was having okay moments then. Or, you know, that 2-hour block in, I don't know what was going on. And just notice it. You want it to look hard for your own internal experience, because it's always there. Right. There's nothing special to do, but just start noticing. What drains you in the course of the day? I have another slide in other presentation. What drains you in the course of your day? It's not always at work. It might be relationships, it might be the neighborhood, it might be fear of the future, whatever. Just notice what drains you and notice what energizes you. Just start with that simple experience of yourself as you are, and just start to become more aware. And as you become aware, your questions are going to come further and further.
Great.
It's a long answer, but
Thank you.
there's a number of pieces in there.
Allan, when you did that first guided meditation and you asked people to reflect on what they felt, I want to share 2 comments with you about that. So when I paid attention, I noticed a tension in my chest. But as I noticed it with the breath, it began to relax.
Yes.
And then the next one was, I became aware of light coming into me with each breath and a feeling of peace. So these were just 2 reflections of
Yes.
their experiences. Did you
Yes.
want to make a comment
Yeah.
on that at all? Or?
I'm going to go back to a slide, and I'm going to go back to this slide here. Is that slide showing up on the page, the orchestra slide? Yeah. The way that relaxation arises, and some people call it feeling centered, relaxed, peaceful, grounded, calmer. My thoughts are present, but they're not so intense, they're not yelling at me. My emotions are there, but somehow I've got a distance. What happens when we pay attention in the moment and just settle in on the breath? The body knows how to calm down. And the reason that it calms down is we're not feeding the stuff that gets us worked up. We're not getting into the storying and the judging and the criticizing. So when we just bring our attention to something non-thinking, we automatically calm down. The body knows how to do it. That's why I walk in nature and you're listening to the birds and you're looking at the trees and then there's a squirrel in the tree. Your mind is taken out of what's called the default mode network, the DMN it's called. Because we're always going through the world with a self-referential story. But when we stop doing that, and it naturally arose. That was the N. Those are 2 examples full of the N in the natural arising. That 2 people noticed, even in the presence of the pain or the discomfort, oh, that's not so bad. Because they didn't have a whole story about it. They just saw it for what it is, without judging or what's wrong with me, or I need to get an EKG or a CT scan or something. No. I've got an ache. Okay, I've got an ache.
Thank you. We have a question from Barb. I asked myself how paying attention helps with panic attacks. We can notice that we are about to throw up. Is it then too late if we have become out of control? So I guess the question really is reflecting, at what point do we become aware of what our mind is presenting to us?
Yeah.
And is mindfulness even helpful after we've had the thought, or even after we've acted in a way that maybe is not that appropriate?
There are about 3 questions in there, and I will go through them. It'll come out. And I just trust the process. Thanks for asking the question. I am a psychiatrist, so yeah, I've worked with people who've had panic attacks. So let's start at the beginning there. With practice, paying attention and awareness, the earlier you can catch it, the better. That's why we've got smoke detectors in the house. I don't want to wake up when I'm feeling the flames burning in my bed. So the earlier the better. And with practice, you can catch it earlier. Then there is, for the panic attacks, there's a whole lot of relaxation that people can do, and breathing and so forth, because what happens is we often become tighter with our breath. That can happen when we tense. It's not only in panic attacks. And so we start to breathe in a very shallow way, and we feel as if we're not catching breath, and then we think we're suffocating, and then we think we're having a heart attack, and the mind just jumps on, and we get this whole scrimmage that feeds all the panic. So I used to say to people, for example, and then we do a reality check. You look at your relationship to the panic attack. Have you ever died from your panic attack? Well, no. Do you know anyone who's ever died from a panic attack? No. Are they unpleasant? Yes. And then, of course, with something like panic attacks, they can reach a point where they're frequent enough or severe enough that they're interfering with your life. And I've said this on a number of occasions. We cannot meditate ourselves out of things that perhaps need other attention. So there are psychologists, there are mental health workers, there's counselors, there's psychiatrists, there's family docs, etc. So you can't meditate your way out of something when another tool is needed. Something else may need to be done. So the earlier you can catch it, the better. If you've made a mess and you've gone all the way down that whole black hole of a full-blown panic attack and you notice, boy, my mind was all out, that's great. Because that capacity to reflect back on what you did that wasn't helpful,
Yes.
I need to stop doing that. I've got to catch that story that I'm about to die. No, I've had 40 panic attacks, but none of them have killed me. It's unlikely the 41st.
Excellent.
So you can reflect back, make the changes, let go of thoughts that aren't helpful. What thoughts would be helpful? And sometimes people can't do that on their own.
Yeah.
That's where the professional mental health people come in.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dawn. I've witnessed many of Allan's talks, even shared talks with him. And this evolution of his take on humanity is absolutely invaluable. All of this makes complete sense for those of us wanting out of fear and confusion. Thank you beyond words for your E=mc² and shared wisdom. Simplicity and clarity is the answer to the psychology entropy of our world, and the individual is the only place to begin this change.
Thank you for your kind words, Don. A couple of comments on your comments. It was Gandhi, I believe, who said, be the change in the world you want to see. We don't need more division. We don't need more posters and banners. We need more peace. We need more joy. We need more beauty. We need more compassion. We need more forgiveness. We need more kindness. So to elaborate on Don's comment there, exactly. Thank you, Don. The other thing, E=mc², it's interesting because I have a side interest in quantum mechanics and quantum energy. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Energy and mass are interchangeable. So we have a matter, we have a bodily form. All of us are given this. It's how we move on the planet. We have a body, but we also have energy. And there's a lot of work going on these days with energy work, with energy field, where it's tied in. We all know we're energy, we all know we're electricity because we can have EEGs of our brains, we can have EKGs of our hearts. So to tune into these more subtle energies because they will teach us things. So we are energy and we are matter at the same time. And so thank you for that reminder, Don.
Thanks, Allan. So we have a question from Christine, who's one of our WTM faculty. How do we ensure that we don't start chasing balance and harmony? That at some level we may be avoiding. It can be a bit of a trap when we first start.
Yes. Beautiful question, Christine. I alluded to it, and I'm elaborating on something I said in the talk, which was yesterday when I felt this funk, I didn't quickly jump to, there's something wrong with me, I need to fix this. We've got to sit with it long enough to investigate it. And I investigated it in the sense that I'm aware that some of this energy or the sadness, profound sadness, is mine. There's also a shift in the planet. There's a shift in the planet and the energy, and a number of people have been talking about this, that this is the greatest shift in my lifetime that I've experienced on the planet. We haven't had a world war, but this COVID thing, the last 18 months, what we've all been through, has shifted everything. It shifted our ideas of job, it shifted ideas of economy, globalization, racial issues, indigenous issues came up, George Floyd, plight of refugees, all kinds of stuff. So there's a real shift in energy that we need to meet this. We mustn't just push it away because we have to work wisely with all these parts of ourselves. Because if I just deny it and ignore it, I'm not in relation with it, and then I can't work with it. And then I'm Pollyanna-ish, or my head is in the sand, or I'm denying or ignoring it. Have you got any comments on that, Phil?
No, I think that's great. I think that it...
Absolutely. So again, we shouldn't make mindfulness a job. It's not another job. Oh, now I've got mindfulness to add. I've attended a number of teachings with John Kabat-Zinn, and a number of the things he said stuck for me. One of them was that with practice, mindfulness just becomes part of you and it starts to do you. When I first got into this 15 years ago, I didn't understand that. But as I've just be with it, and suddenly I find that mindfulness is doing me.
Yes.
And so it becomes part of your first nature, he says. It's not another job to do. It's not another task to do. That's why it's a way of being rather than the doing. I've emphasized a lot the being tonight. Because mindfulness is a way of paying attention on purpose, moment to moment, with less judgment and criticism.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have a question. And this is from Laura. Do you have suggestions for being mindful with chronic pain and breaking unhelpful thinking habits around long-term chronic pain? So our issue with, perhaps as the Buddha said, pain is expected and suffering is optional.
Yeah. I'm not a pain expert. I presume, for the purposes of my response, I'll assume this is a chronic physical pain. What I do know is that where there are pain clinics, and I believe there are a couple in Calgary for chronic pain, a lot of the emphasis is to help people understand what their disease is, the cause of the physical pain, to understand what's the natural course of this. Is it likely to get better? Is it likely to be cured or whatever? What are your expectations about the pain? There's grief, because pain might shorten people's lives. So I know a personal trainer who has had rheumatoid arthritis for a very long time. This person always has in the back of their mind, what if my rheumatoid arthritis flares up?
Yes.
So to work with grief, because it often causes loss of lifestyle, of function, there's grief to be worked through. So pain clinics will often work through grief. There's expectations to work through. What are you expecting? Because if you're expecting a pill, no. And a lot of the psychologists, counselors, social workers, etc., who work in the pain clinics, they talk with people about their relationship to the pain. And even as crazy as it sounds, that sometimes we can offer kindness and gentility and peace and good wishes to the pain. I know you're telling me that you're inflamed. Thank you, ankle, for having pain because you're trying to tell me not to walk, but I have to walk on you. I'm sorry. So you can really turn around from having this adversarial relationship with the pain to in fact leaning right into it and recognizing that you and the pain are on a journey together, and how are we going to be together? We are conjoined twins. Your pain is there, your suffering is there. And we can think of pain in a very broad way as well. It's not only physical pain.
Right.
So I'm thinking here, chronic pain as chronic pain here as physical. But in fact, those very things we bring to our emotional pain or spiritual pains, exactly the same thing. What's my relationship to my past? What's my relationship to my pain? What's my relationship to, having a death in the family? It's exactly the same principles.
And can you take this one step further? Allan, you mentioned this, that there's Allan, the psychiatrist, the father, the whatever. And that's all are stories that we make up about who we are. Can you talk about relationship to the sense of self that end in the reign of non-identification, and terms of how that is the liberating aspect of how we are in relationship with everything? Because it's always, everything is being referenced back to I, to me. And it's when we own the me, we run into the problem. So
yes.
this is the crux. Can you share a little bit about, because this I think is really perhaps the pivotal point, that a little bit of the process, and how do we step out of owning the sense of self?
The harmony slide comes helpful for me here. So, there is an Allan Donsky, exists in this body. I experience myself as this. I'm looking out from the skull through these eyes. I know where we are. It's September the 2nd, public library, nickel, da-da-da. All of that, psychiatrist, all of that is utility for moving in the world. It has a worldly function, a material function, right? The photo of my passport and all that kind of stuff, ID. That is just a vehicle. The liberating part that you talk about, Phil, is as we look at our stories here, and I'll go back a few slides even, as we look at what we believe ourselves to be, we can see that all of this fluctuates. This all fluctuates all the time because nothing is permanent. Right? I may be awake and alert now. In a few hours, I'll be asleep. Tomorrow's another day. My thoughts come, my thoughts go. My emotions come, my emotions go. Even my body's changing all the time. My bone marrow, blood cells are being made all the time. My skin sheds, my hair goes grey. We're constantly changing. Now the problem comes when we believe that those labels, in my view, those labels we have, psychiatrist, that that's who I am. But there's this other part of me that exists at the same time where all this stuff is fluid, where I get to choose what my, this slide here, what my intention is. With awareness and attention, I've got choice. I don't want to be this angry Allan. I don't want to, whatever. So stop doing what's not working and then make healthier choices and wiser choices. So the fact that I can change, the fact that there's parts of me which can change, that's just fantastic. That's incredibly liberating. You mean I'm not what happened to me? No. The psychologist Carl Jung had a lovely saying, translated it is, I don't read the German and he wrote in German, but he says, you are not what happened to you, you are who you choose to become. This is not to deny that even if horrible stuff's happened in your life, and terrible stuff happened to people all the time, this is not denying it. But that's not who you are. What happened to you is not who you are. It's the stories that start to ossify, to calcify, to keep us stuck, because we identify with the pain. We identify with psychiatrist, or we identify with whatever. And that causes problems, because once you ossify it and calcify it and define it, well, there's no room for change anymore. So I had a friend who said to me a couple of years ago, you're not even a psychiatrist anymore, Allan, you're a mindfulness teacher. And I was jolted because I was, what do you mean I'm not a psychiatrist? I almost got defensive about him trying to take away my label. What do you mean I'm not a psychiatrist? I've still got my license, you know. Anyway, it's a huge conversation, Phil, and of course this is where mindfulness can take us into this with awareness and attention to looking at the stories. That's exactly it. Yeah. Does a story work for me? Not am I justified in having it, because you're always justified in having a story. Well, this person did this, and my children this, and my neighbor that, or my teacher this, whatever. Yeah, we've all got it, and everyone agrees. But that's not the issue. Yeah. The question is, does a story make my life better? And if it doesn't, change it.
Yeah. Thank you, Allan. So we have a question. What if, let's say, all of a sudden, I might be in great danger and I might need to keep myself as safe as possible? How do I take action instead of just continuing to freak out? So again, we come back to that question where we lose the capacity to make wise choices, and that what we're doing is that we are reacting rather than responding to the present moment.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that sort of spontaneous lack of control that occurs?
Yeah. Back on the slide of the orchestra, the one at the bottom that says regulate biology, this is instinct. This is the reptile brain, fight or flight or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So the person here is talking about a situation, and I'm glad they've kind of clarified, this is a dangerous situation. Now, instinctively, we've only got 3 choices there. Actually, we've got 5. Fight, you're attacking me, I will defend myself. Run, if I can run faster than you, I will. Sometimes the shock is so immense, you freeze. There's nothing for you to do. There's nowhere to run. And panicking, you don't want to show vulnerability. The other one that can happen is you can faint. Right. Play possum, it's called. And the other one is fawn, F-A-W-N. So this is what happens in hostage situations. So sometimes hostages, it happened in the Stockholm Syndrome and stuff, where you try and befriend the person who could kill you. Right? That's called fawning. You suck up. When there's danger, your body will respond. Now, if it's a danger that you're used to and you can practice, like if you're a firefighter, they will go through drills where they will put with the mask and all of that. You will train yourself not to panic if you're in repeated danger. But you can't know what's going to happen in a very dangerous situation. I don't know which of those 3 would be my fight, flight, or freeze, would be my first response if I was in a dangerous situation. Yeah. So without more details, but stay with the question, whoever's asking it, just stay with the question. Is this a recurrence? Is this a once-off? Is this person talking about a flashback they're having? And you can have a panic attack in a flashback. There's a whole lot to unpack in the story here that I can't respond further. But being aware of what your initial response is. And if it's a danger, sure, leave if you can. But sometimes you can't.
Thank you. So we have one question here, last one from Dawn again. I find discernment on myself and regulation of my own nervous system reaction by choosing to give selflessly, yet with self-respect. And that helps me to disidentify with the self that disconnects me from others and myself. So it sounds like acting in a way of perhaps loving kindness, compassion for self and other allows oneself to step out of the ownership of self.
Correct.
So does loving kindness and altruism help you to disidentify?
Anything that stops you from being in your selfing mode will be helpful. That's why exercise is helpful. That's why volunteering is helpful. That's why belonging in community is helpful. That's why singing in a choir is helpful. Whatever it is, we do things in community because that perspective and that connection, right? And it's in the orchestra as well, I've got relationship to self and others, that it can stop you from selfing. That there are many doorways to stop the selfing. Because when we start to self, we can ruminate, we can have a pity party, we can justify why we're feeling lousy, we can get really mired in the yucky stuff, we can start to justify all kinds of things which are justified in our thinking mind, but they're not particularly nourishing or compassionate. And I want to say a word about compassion here. We've got a couple of minutes left. If there aren't any other questions, happy to stay on, as you said, Phil. The word passion is not related to excitement or lust. The word passion has the same root as the word pathos, which is pathology, which is suffering. So the word compassion is to be with suffering. So the question then becomes, well, how can we be with suffering? Well, we've got to pay attention to it. We've got to lean into it. We've got to acknowledge it. We can't push it away. And compassion can be everything from sitting in silence to holding somebody's hand to doing overt charity work. And then to offer ourselves compassion. Can I be with my own suffering in a way which is nurturing? Sometimes I've asked people, have you ever been your own best friend? No. What do you mean my own best friend? My best friend's Mary or Joe. I say, what would it be like if you were your own best friend? What do you mean? And I say, well, have you noticed how hard you criticize yourself? Would you ever treat your own best friend that way? No, never. Of course I wouldn't treat Mary or Johnny. So why do you criticize yourself so much? Why don't you let yourself off the hook? Why aren't you practicing forgiveness? So this whole idea of compassion, and I'm glad we're ending on this note, because really it comes full circle. For all of us right now, whatever was going before COVID has been multiplied 5 times by all the COVID stuff now, because it's right here with us. We know people who've died of COVID. We know people who, I've got a cousin who's a long hauler, who got COVID nearly a year ago, still having aches and pains, days in bed, incapacitated, fevers a year later.
So just to finish this last question and sort of taking on what our previous question was with Christine in that sense, can you briefly address that issue of pathologic altruism? In the sense that, I'm just going to act in a compassionate and loving kindness sort of way. But that can potentially put us at the risk of what is called spiritual bypassing. In other words, I'm not going to address my own individual needs and difficulties and woundings. And so if I just act in a way that's altruistic to you, then I tend to gloss over my own needs and I end up suffering. Can you briefly address that potential problem that can occur by acting kind, but not attuning to your own issues?
Correct. And some people are doing that not because they want to or because it's good for them to do that. Altruism is good, but an empty glass cannot quench thirst, and you have to put your own oxygen mask on first on the aeroplane. So some people have been taught that if you meet your own needs, you're selfish. So you just have to keep on giving. The problem is burnout. And the problem is you burn out, and when you burn out, you become resentful. And some people have been told not to meet their own needs. Some people's emotional needs were dismissed or neglected or criticized, and they weren't taught to look after themselves. But I don't know how an empty glass can fill their own needs, and I don't know how I can help the passenger next to me without my own oxygen mask.
Yeah. There's a comment that goes on to that, but saying, but passion could also be something good, like feeling happy when your friends are happy.
Yes, absolutely. I drink from many wells in terms of my knowledge base. There are, in Buddhism, they called the Brahma Viharas. Some people call them the divine abodes. Some people have called them the 4 stations of the heart. And the 4 are compassion for when there's suffering. When there's yummy stuff, joy to share with your friend who's having a good time. Absolutely. The 3rd is to offer goodwill. This is where intention comes in. Loving kindness. And people have said if you don't like the term loving kindness, it's mushy. Just think about goodwill or ill will. Can I offer goodwill to everybody, and myself included? And then the 4th one is equanimity. To have the right amount at the right time of each of them. You don't open a funeral with a stand-up comic act.
Right.
Right, and when you're going to see Robin Williams, you're not expecting an academic discourse on history. So the right thing at the right time, but those are the three.
Right.
And those in the right amounts, joy, you'll never go wrong with goodwill, and when it's time for compassion, you have compassion. Those are the 4 stations, and they go together.
Allan, we've come to the end of our questions. A wonderful evening. I wondered if you might just summarize your thoughts, some take-home points for our audience, please.
Let's end where we started. I said they're always beginnings, so here's the beginning of the end. The key pieces, it starts with simple. Some people say, where do I start? Practice paying attention and becoming aware. How do you do that? SPK. Slow down, be a little more patient and kind. There's no emergency. Life is not an emergency. Slow down, be patient, kind. Look for peace, beauty, and joy. You'll find them if you look for them. Think beyond, in terms of self-care, think beyond just emotional regulation and thinking more positively. We've got these other parts of us in the orchestra, these other instruments. The goodness, relationship to self and others, my heart, my spirit, my energy, my soul, what's important for me, the becomings, the being human. Think big picture, and then you apply the mindfulness to all of this. And just sit there. And it's a journey that never ends. Your inbox will not be empty on the day you die. And that is wonderful, because it means there's always something to look forward to. There's something more to do. There's something more. And if we were made perfect, life would be boring. I don't want a boring life. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I don't want to be swamped either. I don't want to live in a war zone. But I have my choices that I can make every day to improve in whatever I can be in the world, as Don said, and then going outwards to make my family better, to be better for myself, my family, my neighbors, my community, my country, the planet. That's it.
Allan, another exceptional evening.
Thank you.
Always speaking from your heart and your wisdom. And I think that there was a lot of very valuable points, and I want to thank you so much for your generosity in coming here this evening and offering this talk to our group.